Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my series about going over the Pokemon of this game. Uh, in this episode, we are covering the Dugtrio. Now, Dugtrio is a ground type. It's got that Figgy Berry, but berry isn't really what we're looking for on this guy. It's an ingredient specialist, so the ingredients list is really what we're looking at. And Dugtrio is interesting. It's of the snoozing type. Now, ground types, as of right now, there are only two in the game. There's Dugtrio and Marowak. And Dugtrio's in the snoozing category, while Marowak's in the slumbering, so we don't really know exactly where ground type's supposed to be. It could be in. It's more likely to be in snoozing, just because there are already 6 types that are well associated with slumbering, and 6 types that are well associated with dozing. If the ground type is supposed to go in slumbering, then that would make there be 7, and then there'd be 5 in snoozing. So I think that the ground type is supposed to be generally snoozing, and Marowak is more the exception. But the Dugtrio fits that like expectation of a ground type being snoozing. So yeah, not too much else to be said about that. They've got the Charge Strength S skill. I mean, it's a weaker-ish skill. Most skills do fine on an ingredient specialist, but it's like the one specialty where I actually like seeing the energy, like the self-recharging skill the most. But they do fine with other things as well. You're not really looking for their skill. You're not going to get very much value out of it, but it's just a little extra value because why not? It's got a 2% trigger rate. It's not going to be triggering that often, but where it really matters is the Dugtrio's ingredient rate and the speed. Now, the speed is a little disappointing on the Dugtrio, considering that they're known from the base games for being fast, but the Dugtrio, it's got a speed of 46 minutes and 40 seconds. Now, this is pretty standard. If you remember back to the Venusaur, that's the same speed as the Venusaur, the same speed as the Blastoise. But both of those Pokemon have much higher ingredient rates than the Dugtrio. The Dugtrio's only got the 19% ingredient rate, which is actually pretty low. Like, sadly low. And it doesn't really make much up for it in the ingredient list either. Now, oftentimes, like, if you go to Quagsire, I believe it's the same ingredient rate as Quagsire, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe 19% is what Quagsire's rate is as well. But the Quagsire has huge procs down here. While the Dugtrio only has 3 leaks and 4 leaks, and 5 tomatoes and 7 tomatoes, like, they're mid value for an ingredient specialist, but they're not great value in terms of what the size of these procs are. If we go to check out the level 60 combinations, we can see that the strongest in raw value for the ingredient procs is the double leak. So even though this is 5 tomatoes and only 3 leaks, leaks are so much stronger than the tomatoes that it actually comes out on top to have this double leak option comparative to the leak at 30, or the tomato at 30. So, but when it comes to synergy, if we take a look at a lot of the dishes, there aren't any dishes that you can see throughout here that use tomatoes and leeks, so there's not really any value in having those tomatoes, because if you're running the Dugtrio and you're consistently making one meal for every meal of the week, one of your 2 ingredients is going to get used as filler, which you really don't really want as an ingredient specialist. Now, there's some interesting synergy between the leeks and the beans. If you go and check out the Ninja Curries and the Ninja Salad, then you can see leek and beans, which are some of the strongest meals in the game. That seems all fine and dandy if it wasn't for the fact that there's a much, much better option for covering the leeks and the beans, and that is the Quaquaval. So, if we get into a little comparison here, we got the Dugtrio. I'm just doing base, level 60, not accounting for natures and sub-skills for this analysis here. I just wanted to get into, at a base rate, what do they do? And the Dugtrio, at its base, at level 60, is going to produce roughly 29 leeks per day, and 8 tomatoes, if you have the A, B, B list. Now, if you have a Quaquaval, it's producing 34. It heavily outproduces that Dugtrio for even just the mono leaks, but where the Quaquaval comes out even further ahead of the Dugtrio is the fact that it's producing beans, which, as we discussed, beans and leeks actually have synergy. Beans and tomatoes do not. So the Quaquaval just hasn't. It has better leek production and it has better synergy. Now, one of the big concerns that I've heard regarding this double leek build on the Quaquaval is that the level 30 proc on the Quaquaval for leeks is only 2 instead of 3. So meanwhile, it's got 5 soybeans, which is a much stronger proc. So some players I know are opting for this more of an ingredient spread on the Quaquaval. Which, if you do this, the Dugtrio does come out on top for leeks. But this one, as you can see, does come out in terms of overall strength because the soybean proc is a stronger proc than the 2 leeks at level 30. But if you're really looking for a more mono leek producer, then the double leek Quaquaval is the option. I think both of these hold weight, but that's a discussion for a different day, way down the road, because Quaquaval is way at the end of the decks. But now, for extra comparison, I threw in the soybeans on the Dugtrio in there as well, because it is a possibility at level 60. And as you can see, yeah, you're really not making either of these meals with the Dugtrio set up that way. I mean, you don't really care about the tomatoes because with the tomatoes, they just don't synergize with the other ingredients very well. So it doesn't really matter that they're the A ingredient because you don't really care about them anyway. But the fact that you just have that slot that's being used for absolutely nothing in terms of what you're looking for means that you are just hurting in the other regards. In fact, the ABC Dugtrio produces less leeks and less beans than the AAB Quaquaval. So there really isn't a niche for Dugtrio yet, unless they release some sort of dish that uses tomatoes and leeks. Because the Quaquaval just, its existence is the epitome of power creep since they came along. Now, if you already have a Dugtrio, a good option will still be as good as when you caught it. I have a Dugtrio that actually has the ABB list that is pretty strong. Dude's got a lot of speed, and it does produce those leeks pretty well, and it will be better at top as well because of the favored berry. I'm saying that it is something to be considered as well. If you're on the right island, then favored berry is going to go a long ways. As you can see, even though they're producing not as many ingredients as you want, or more synergistic ingredients, the raw berry strength, berries add up. So maybe the Dugtrio could be a more off-meta choice for top going forward, but generally speaking, Quaquaval is more what you want to be hunting for both leeks and soybeans. And if you're looking for mono tomatoes, I mean, maybe that goes to the Dugtrio if you manage to catch it that way. But you really shouldn't necessarily be hunting the Dugtrio for mono tomatoes. I mean, let's just see. If we compare mono tomato Dugtrio to something like, let's say, a mono tomato Victory Bell, because that's another pretty... Well, I see a lot of people actually go for... Well, yeah, Victory Bell would be a pretty common one. If you have this guy at level 60, as you can see, it makes 71 versus 56. So it's outclassed for tomatoes, too, if you just go with the mono list. So I really don't recommend the Dugtrio for too many options these days. Before Quaquaval existed, I would say Dugtrio is the hunt for leeks, since the only other option it existed on at level 30 was Ditto, and Ditto has other roles to fill, mostly tails. So it's in this weird spot of it doesn't really have a good role, and because of that, you use it to fill whatever role it needs on your team. If you see one, it's not really a bad mon to catch. It produces ingredients okay. As you can see here, the level 60 Dugtrio produces 29 leeks per day if you have the ABB list, which does... It gets kind of close to making this ninja curry, especially if you have the right sub-skills. Like, you just throw one tier of ingredient finding on this guy, and I think it'll have it. Let's see. 38, yeah. So, realistically, it's a pretty good mon, but it's just there are better options that exist, so I wouldn't recommend hunting it. It used to be better in the metagame because it was really the only leak option, but now we have Quackable. If you're gonna hunt the Dugtrio, it exists at Greengrass and Top, as is I believe is the case with the Dugtrio Diglett. Oh, they also exist at Cyan. You learn something new every day. They don't have a 4-star sleep, which is kind of notable. I think that's just because it'd be kind of morbid to have something digging through Snorlax's chest. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything to be said about the Dugtrio. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.